Pediatric Lounge, a podcast taking you behind the door of the physician's lounge to get a deeper insight into just what docs are talking about today. From the clinically profound to the wonderfully routine and everything in between. Good morning, George. It's Tuesday and we're in the middle of the month in July already.
Yeah, would you believe that? It's raining every day here on Long Island, and it's like summer didn't even start. Anyway, today we have a fabulous guest, Dr. Eric Tyler, and the title of discussion is Rural Pediatrics, where every child still matters. Today on the show, we have the honor of welcoming Dr. Eric Tyler, a seasoned pediatrician with over 40 years experience in caring for children and families in Alexandria City, Alabama. Dr. Tyler earned his medical degree from the University of Tennessee and completed training at Alabama Children's Hospital in Birmingham. Currently runs a practice by the name of Pediatric Associates of Alexandria City and Kelton, and is affiliated with Russell Medical Center. He's known for his warm, family-centered approach and commitment to clear communication. He's built his reputation as a trusted voice in pediatric care across rural Alabama. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be a part of this esteemed group.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about, we always start the podcast with, why did you become a pediatrician? And more importantly, how did you end up in rural medicine? Tell us about your journey.
I have two brothers. I grew up in Middle Tennessee. About the time I was 7, I had a younger brother that had chronic tonsillitis. It was back in the days that they didn't even look in ears too much. And he got dehydrated badly one night, and I was not allowed to go into the hospital, but I heard my father talk about his receipt of IV fluids. And I don't know if either you two guys know about clysis. They didn't stick IVs in veins back then. They stuck a needle in the thigh, and they put a little hyaluronidase in the IV fluids so it would dissolve some of the adhesiveness, and they allowed absorption of the IV fluids to go from the area. And he came home and talked about that. And finally, they made a decision to remove his tonsils. And when they gave him ether and they touched his tonsil with a hemostat, they were so necrotic that they basically fell apart. And at that point, I decided that maybe things could be done a little bit better for kids. That had a huge impact on my decision to go into medicine. My younger brother is a dentist who works in a rural community in Tennessee, and my older brother is a nuclear engineer. My father, who grew up farming, instilled in us a work ethic by carrying us to the farm and working us into the ground and saying, do you want to work like this the rest of your life? I decided after my 4-year stint at the University of Tennessee that it looked to me like academic centers had dogma. And I knew the Tennessee dogma fairly well, Memphis dogma fairly well. I worked in the NICU up there, privately run neonatal ICU for about 2 years. And I decided I wanted to go learn another dogma. I moved to Birmingham. My wife's originally from there. And I learned after about the second day there that all the Memphis dog died. they had completely different dogma there. But both places had really good reasons for the foundations of the decisions that they made about this is why we're going to do it this way. The foundations were okay, and I have said this before in some of my lectures to the nursing students. You can't fall in love with the process. You got to fall in love with principles, because processes are going to change. Principles rarely do, and when they do, it's a paradigm shift. Everybody's got to change their processes when that happens. So I really enjoyed my time there. The program was a fledgling program. Stayed on as a first of the 4-year chiefs. That was the year 1984 to 85. Ran the critical care transport system. We didn't have in-house attendings. They all called me if there was a problem. And at the end of that, I had opportunities to do fellowships in critical care and neonatology, but I had been on the political side of academia, and I said, no, I don't think that's for me. I want to go where I feel like I can really make a difference. So I wound up in Alexander City, and that was 40 years ago.
Wow.
So let me ask you, what was it like to grow up on a farm? What kind of a farm was it? Did you grow tobacco? Did you have cattle? And what did you help Dad with?
Yes and yes. We had obviously garden. We didn't grow it. We didn't eat it for the most part. We had chickens for eggs. we had cattle that were registered, Hereford cattle. We put up square bales. It's a constant, never-ending job. Farmers are some of the best practical mathematicians and physicists you'll ever meet. And they're experts at being able to solve the problems around them with little to nothing. It's usually what they have laying around in a junk pile somewhere that they go, oh, I can use this for this. But it really helped me being around my grandfather and my father. My grandfather was born in 1898, and being around them and watch how they looked at a problem, analyzed a problem, and argued about if you do this is going to happen, if you do this is going to happen. We raised tobacco for a few years. That was very much a cash crop in the middle of Tennessee. It was. That's hard work too. It starts in February and doesn't end until December.
And so you must have seen tobacco poisoning, which most of our audience does not have a clue what that is.
Right.
And nobody in my family smoked.
No, when they pick the tobacco,
Oh
the
yeah.
sap,
Oh yeah.
it's
I know.
incredibly sick. People, they have nicotine poisoning, and you don't see it in the cities because they don't farm tobacco in the cities. But you see it in rural Virginia and Tennessee and areas of the country that do grow tobacco. And it's an incredibly bad disease.
Or you had to go through that and you had to pull the suckers off. They wanted to grow large leaves, so you had to pull the little shoots of leaves off, and we all did that barehanded. And then you had to you had to top it, you had to cut the blossoms out so they get taller. And at the end of that, you had nicotine stain on your hand. And the worst were the tobacco worms that were about big around as a stogie cigar, that the first thing they did when you pulled them off to stomp them on the ground was they spit tobacco juice on you.
Oh,
And there's no way you can get that off. It just has to wear off.
oh, well, well. And then it's interesting to me that you mentioned dogma because I had the same feeling about academic institutions. There is one chief that's been there for 30 years and he won't be removed till he dies. And now it's a woman, but in my time, when I started, it was all grumpy old white men. And whatever he said, you couldn't disagree. There was no science. It was a dictatorship and a cruel dictatorship. And from hence comes the white coat organizations that today continue that tradition of dogma and not listening to the parents and not listening to the practicing clinicians who often, like the farmer, have quite a bit of know-how with very little resources. And that hasn't changed. Do you think it's changed? Because it feels to me that it's only gotten worse.
Yeah.
I do think that it's gotten worse, Herb, because it seems that a great deal of time is spent in the residency program teaching about work-life balance. And they actually at Children's asked me to come and talk about that. And I said, I'll have to disqualify myself. I'm pretty lousy at that because I live in a small town. There is no work-life balance.
Yeah, but don't you think that a small town, because I practiced medicine for 3 years in a small town, and there is a tremendous respect for people's time. Like, they don't just call you because the kid sneezed, because they're like, no, I can't bother him. He needs to show up in the office in the morning.
Yeah.
They will call you more often when the kid's really sick or they'll stop by. And at least my experience was they were very differential. They were very kind to you when they needed to bother you. And I was shocked. This is in 1992 through 95. I said, what what call service do we use? Like when somebody needs to reach me, where do they call? And they laughed at me. They go, it's the hospital operator. I'm like, what? I said, and he said, don't worry, you won't get many calls. The hospital operator knows everybody in town and she triages people. I'm like, what do you mean? What training is she has? She has no training, just common sense. Mom calls, 5-year-old has a fever, looks good. She's okay. Well, yeah, I think you can wait. Call the office tomorrow and I'm not gonna bother Dr. Bravo for that. And then before I got there, I don't know, 5, 10 years before that, at this critical access hospital, there was no emergency room doctor in there. It was a nurse. And she would triage stuff and then call the family doctor, the pediatrician, the obstetrician. if she thought it was necessary. If not, she just sent them home and told them to see you in the morning.
Or when I first came here in July '85, that's exactly the way it was, and continued that way for 4 years. That there was no standing ED doc, and whoever was on call for whatever walked through the door. MIs, heart attacks, plane crashes. They didn't have a standing staff there. Now, in terms of being really respectful of your time, when I first came here, and it still happens sometimes, there's usually a line of people at church that want to ask me a question. So my experience is a little bit different than that. Or people knock on your door and say, "Do you think this is okay?"
Yeah, they do that.
I had only one time somebody ever knocked on the door, but they usually respect you. But I came in much later. From what I heard, when they started our office, Dr. Reichman, the interesting thing about a legacy, the man's been passed away. He passed away 25 years ago, yet we're still talking about him. It's amazing. That's a legacy.
You're right.
Because he created it, and he started it in his garage.
Wow.
And then it just advanced and continued and pivoted. Herb, I bet you don't know, I used to work on a farm. In high school, I wanted to be a vet. Listen to this story.
Really?
And so I started working in Monticello, New York. It was a cow farm, getting milk and everything. So the farmer tells us you have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go in the fields and find all the cattle and bring them down. So by 7 o'clock, we can start milking the cow. That was very bad. I didn't like that. One day I overslept and I realized, and they showed up at 7 o'clock by themselves. So we stopped going, and then the cattle just showed up at 7. I was following what somebody said you should do, and I realized it was stupid. And if you did something else, it happened anyway. So why bother? But that's what your dogma stuff. So I guess back then I started becoming a little bit of an outlier, even with cows.
Yeah. The other thing, I think the dogma of the white coat organizations and the medical schools today is there are very few people like you that actually practice pediatrics anymore. In a rural community, you have to attend to the seizure in the ER. There's nobody else. You got to take care of the autistic kid, the kid with the seizure disorder, the kid with diabetes, because you can't ask a parent to drive 3 hours to go see somebody for 30 minutes and then come back. You know how to manage the diabetes for that kid. This is something I observed in '89 when I started my residency, that the academics had no common sense. They were still training pediatricians to go into deliveries and the NICU and the PICU, and we were having all these subspecialties being created. And the majority of us were not going to see the four walls of a PICU once you leave residency. But so much time was spent in the PICU and the NICU, and it still is, for no good reason, because you're not going to use those critical skills once you're in a community practice.
Georgia, I think back in that time, they were using this as manpower.
This manpower.
But maybe it was more of a manpower than a need for education for the vast majority of them. I'm on call right now, and there's a baby that's going to be born today, and I'm responsible. So if I have to run out the door, you know what happens.
You go to C-sections? No.
No, we don't go to C-sections right now because we have anesthesiology there. If they need to be intubated, they can be intubated. That's a great thing, because when I first came here, we attended all C-sections, even 3 o'clock in the morning. Back then, we were still intubating meconium-stained babies.
Yeah.
That none of us really felt like, if they were crying and vigorous, why are you putting them through that? That's what we thought. That was the dogma.
Yeah. But if the newborn's unstable, the anesthesiologist will intubate him, but you'll come in and consult before they transport him out.
I come in and assume care.
Yeah.
And then I put in central lines. We follow the NRP protocol, put in umbilical venous catheters, and to resuscitate it. I've done that twice this year. Chest tubes have to do that, intubate.
Yeah,
so I actually use a lot of those things. It's not like we have a closed nursery. We are everything. I read this quote recently that primary care guys are really multi-specialist.
Especially in a rural area like you. I mean, you're it. You're everything. You're the cardiologist, then the chronologist, the neonatologist, the critical care doctor. But that's not true in most urban and suburban areas of the country anymore.
You're like Doc Hollywood. Remember that movie, Doc Hollywood?
Yeah.
Michael J. Fox. That's
Yeah.
What do you love most about being a rural pediatrician?
I moved to this community at the time when I moved here. It was the headquarters of Russell Athletic Corporation. There were 3 large textile groups when I came here. It was a small community, but it was about what I grew up in Columbia, Tennessee. I had the feel that people really knew one another, they cared for one another. 2007, it was purchased by Berkshire Hathaway. That now owns all the textiles. All 3 of those fall under one roof. It's all called Fruit of the Loom. And currently, we only have 200 employees that are with Russell Corporation. So the community changed a lot. They dismantled the campus of Russell Corporation. And for many years, it looked like a war zone because it was just mounds of concrete, et cetera. It looked like a bomb had dropped there. But the pride of the community, the pride of this small town, that even though it looks like everybody's forgotten us, we're not going to give up. That's something that really resonates with me. And I quickly began to fall in love with the patients and the need that they had and trying to meet those needs, whatever they were, trying to get more education, staying abreast of the new ideas and not being scared to jump in the middle of a new idea. I don't know, this was just a good fit for my outside the box personality and with this idea that I felt like that I could come here and make a difference.
Wow. So I guess you're more connected to the community and all the kids in the practice. You have to.
And a lot of them, their parents and their grandparents.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because this is I'm working on my 3rd generation down here, but it's given me a unique position to be able to come up with some ideas and to reach out and build some coalitions. We had a great concern about summer retention with children. I reached out to our local area United Way, and we started a summertime reading program. There's only 70 days of summer, and most of the children in our community are Medicaid recipients, about 82% of my practice. We utilized a local elementary school. We got a group together, gently used books, employed a teacher, and we would have half-day Wednesdays for 4 consecutive weeks where they would bring in a magician, they would bring in martial arts. It was just special programming that the kids really loved. And then we built in physical education in Alabama. The Feed the Kids in the summer program through the Department of Agriculture is called Break for a Plate. It was housed there, so all those children got food. And then we let them go and pick out books, 2 books, and they got to do that every week. And the hope was that they would read. And for many of those children, that was the vacation they got in the summer. It was really well loved. And then the pandemic killed it. And then after the pandemic, the schools have had so much reading remediation to do that almost all of them have offered summer reading programs. But that's just one example. Because I'm in a small town and I've got this idea, there are a lot of people that want to come alongside and say, hey, I really think that's a good thing. I saw Resilience, the movie about adverse childhood experiences, in September of 2019. In January of 2020, we asked 32 agencies to send people, had over 50 people to come together and view the film. And they all agreed, hey, this is the same thing. We're all dealing with the same thing. It just has a different face. That's what I see. And we've tried to engage in conversations. And out of that, we're going to be launching a program with our local elementary school for grades 3 and 4 to put in a meditation program that's going to start up on August 5th. We have real close friends at Auburn University School of Nursing, and we're going to actually gather data, because things that work in California, when you bring it to Alabama, the first thought is it'll never work here. And so if you gather data about, hey, you can't say it didn't work here. We tried it. It does work here. And this is what we saw. These are the things that we saw it do for us.
If you were to work at an institution, they would say, no way, this doesn't generate any income. What was the return on investment for you on this project? Sounds like a lot of work. You're not billing anybody.
No.
There has to be a return on investment for you.
The return on investment here, George, is that children might stay in school longer. They might be more successful.
Right.
I'm looking long term. One of my mantras throughout all this is if you want to change the evening news, you're going to have to educate our kids. Personally, I'm sick of the evening news. Why don't we educate our children? And people can get unified behind that idea of we're doing this for the sake of our children. And our little community that's impoverished is about to open a $140 million brand new high school in January. That's us trying to make a difference in all children's lives.
And how many?
I guess I'm just looking long term. Am I going to make any money off this? No, I'm funding it.
And how many kids is the high school? How many will they have?
Our high school graduates about 170 to 200 students per year, and it's a 4-year school. So I guess there are 800. The place where we're implementing the meditation program is only 2 grades. So it's probably going to be about 400, grade 3 and grade 4.
And how many of those kids actually go to your practice, do you think? 10%, 20, 50, all of them?
Not all of them, no.
A good chunk.
Maybe about 60%.
So that's your return on investment. You're the man. Everybody sees your face. They know. So it's later that your return on investment appears. The relationship, as Dr. Bravo would always say.
It is the relationship. Right.
Yeah.
And your practice is 2 pediatricians and 4 nurse practitioners?
That's correct.
It's a very pretty office. Who designed it? Your wife?
No, actually, it was a marina when it first came to life. Yes, it was a marina. I was telling George prior to you joining us that we live on the shores of Lake Martin, which is one of the largest man-made lakes in America. It's got about 800 miles of shoreline. So there are a lot of marine mechanics, a lot of marine options, because whenever you have an engine, it breaks down and somebody's got to repair it. It then got morphed into a daycare center, and that's when it was purchased in '84, renovated, and we've been in that building for 40 years.
Wow. It's like McDonald's almost.
And then do you have other colleagues that attend the hospital, the pediatricians, or you're the only pediatric group in town?
There's one other pediatrician in town. We do share a call, but during the week, it's like that pediatrician takes care of their patients that are born. We take care of ours. And we have a lot of 40% of the deliveries are unattached patients that are not going to use anybody in the community. And the person on call takes care of all the unattached patients as well.
Oh, well. And how many deliveries does the hospital do a year?
That's a good question. If you go back about 4 years, we had about 250 deliveries a year. At present, maybe about 150. We've lost a full-time OB, and they've been recruiting and had a real struggle finding someone that wants to live in rural Alabama and take care of our clientele.
Yeah. I'm surprised you have an anesthesiologist. A lot of these critical access hospitals have nurse anesthetists only.
We have those as well, and they're all good. Really good friends with them.
Yeah.
So what's something special about rural pediatrics that most people don't know? There has to be something. You told us a lot of hard things, getting up at night, going to this, dealing with that problem. What do you like? What's special? Tough question. It has to be something. You got to convince me to come work for you. Why would I want to come work for you?
I think especially at my stage in life, my point in my career, when I walk into a grocery store or when I walk into Walmart and kids see me, they run to me because they want to interact with me. We have relationships. When they come in the office, I talk to them, I speak to them. That's really gratifying. And sometimes I've had a hard day, a hard night, and I get behind somebody in a line and they go, "Look, you've had a hard day today. Why don't you go ahead of me?" That's really kind. I just feel to be able to look at this one thing. We in 2019 were declared a vaccine champion by the CDC, the only practice in Alabama to ever get that. And we did that because our HPV vaccination rate, success rate was 80%.
How did you get to 80%?
Because we know our patients, Herb.
Everybody trusts it.
And they trust us.
He wouldn't say anything negative. Yeah. Now, it sounds out here in Long Island, we have a specialist every other foot. What do you do over there if you need a specialist? I presume you got to drive somewhere, right?
Correct. Orthopedics, endocrinology, neurology, neurosurgery, all that's Birmingham. And that's a good hour and a half drive. If a family's going to go to Birmingham to see a specialist, it's a whole day. Then you got to negotiate your way through the third largest children's hospital campus in America now. They just renovated it. It covers like 5 blocks. That's a real challenge for them. Children's Alabama 6 years ago launched a Project Echo in the area of behavioral pediatrics. And we were one of the 5 pilot groups that were asked to participate in that. And as a consequence, that our acronym stands for Pediatric Access to Telehealth Services. So we're a spot where if we find mental health cases that are way beyond us, they can actually come to our office and sit down and have counseling there and do telehealth there, which has been a real game changer. We've really been able to increase our service area because families can get to us when they can't get to a large center.
So that's beyond Project Echo, right? Project Echo is an adult learning model where they teach you basic skills, but you're limited by resources. Taking care of type 1 diabetic, a small practice only has a handful of them. So you don't see a lot. You don't have the nurse educator. You don't have the nutritionist. You don't have the psychologist that deals with chronic disease management and how it affects the mother and the child, because you need numbers to be able to run that. So Birmingham's gone beyond and great. Beyond that, they
Well,
provide you with that in your office.
the type 1 diabetics, the insulin dependent ones, they all go to Birmingham. They're all managed out of endocrine in Birmingham. No pediatrician in Alabama manages a type 1 diabetic. Type 2 diabetics, though, which are in some ways just as challenging because they usually have a weight issue as well. And all those services could be helpful, but they're not available.
No, but that's great that Birmingham's gone beyond the Project Echo and provided you with telehealth counseling in your office, because they're basically renting their infrastructure to serve the community. And that's a wonderful model. That's really a very wonderful model. I don't think many places are doing it other than Intermountain Health out in Utah. They do that too.
We don't get compensated for providing the site. There's no compensation for that, but we're helping our patients.
Well, that's compensation enough, right?
So they're coming to your office to deal with your patients?
There are
No.
patients that we offer the service to
Uh-huh.
because that's really the model. They have to be our patient. We access them and make a referral to them, and then the PASS program sets them up. Usually it's 2 to 3 weeks. We've been talking to these people for 6 years, so we know them quite well. And we don't refer the low-hanging fruit. We have to take a stab at managing ADHD and the children with autism. And one of our pilot projects is not waiting 9 months for access to a multi-specialty clinic for ADOS or CARS-2 testing. We have a level 2 test now. We have MCHAT, that's a level 1 test. We also have STAT-3. One of my nurse practitioners gets out trained on, and we're working with Dr. Justin Schwartz, who is the autism expert at Children's, to these younger kids that are slam dunks. They have it in 17 to 36 months. We're trying to find a way to get beyond the 9-month wait. So they won't do 5 multi-specialists to see the children in order to be able to get them the resources they need.
But no, George, what they're doing is the Children's Hospital provides a counselor and the practice provides a virtual room. So the family comes into the office and they're talking to the counselor in Birmingham. And the pediatrician is managing the medicines and the whole health of the child. But so that's why they're renting this infrastructure, because they only use it as needed, but there's not a person in his office all the time providing counseling. I think it's a very good model for smaller practices, not only in rural America, but 1 or 2 pediatrician practice can't afford a mental health professional full time. And so the ability to rent them, even if you don't make any money, even if you lose money by giving them a room, allows you to take better care of the patients.
Yeah.
Or
why should they lose money, Herb? Tell me. Why is that right?
It isn't right. None of this is right, but this is dogma and politics. The way that Medicaid works is it's a program meant to keep people from using the services. That's why the reimbursement is extremely low. So when you pay for something very little, you have a negative incentive for people to enter that market. And so there's more people that need whatever that is, but there's not enough people in the marketplace providing it. And that's why you get 9 months, 2 years wait. This is by design. This is not a mistake. It's somebody in whatever, Alabama or in Richmond, Virginia says, if we raise the taxes in Virginia, we have income taxes, property taxes, they tax our cars, and then they tax us when we buy things at the store. And the politicians sit down and go, if we try to raise the sales tax at 0.5% to afford this, we're going to have a mutiny because people are tired of paying taxes. So we can't. So what can we afford? Because Virginia has a balanced budget amendment and they have to have a rainy fund, so they can't just go out and borrow money and spend it like drunk sailors. And they start looking at, okay, we can give you a Medicaid card, but we'll just pay 50% of Medicare. So 50% of our physicians in Virginia will not accept Medicaid. So they'll have a card, they can go to the emergency room, but there'll be a long wait for an endocrinologist. There'll be a long wait for, even for primary care, there'll be a long wait for behavioral pediatrics, infectious disease, less so for the surgical hospital-based patients. So if you need a cath and you're Medicaid, there's an interventional cardiologist around the corner to do it. But in Virginia right now, the wait for an autism evaluation is a year to 2 years. And it's all because by design, the marketplace has been distorted so that we spend less. And it's foolish because we know that for every month you wait to diagnose that child with autism, you expend an additional $300 when you diagnose them. But it's all about people that want to pay more taxes. And I can't push my population to pay more taxes because they don't want to. And I got to make sure that the budget is balanced. And that's difficult.
From my chair, it seems like almost all the great hardships that come upon countries, poverty, war, children bear a disproportionate burden of that. And as one of my local representatives, now he said this years ago, and I'm not speaking for any of my local representatives, but we asked him to do something to shore up Medicaid. And he looked us square in the eye and said, kids can't vote. I'm worried about getting reelected. I'm going to do what my constituency wants me to do, and children can't vote.
This is the greatest country in the world, and it's been a beautiful experiment. But nothing comes free. And that is a problem with having a democracy. That the people that we elect represent those of us that are involved and those of us that vote. And at the end of the day, they have to answer to those people because otherwise they get booted out. But I can't figure out a better system. It's just not perfect.
Yeah.
And it's foolish. We don't invest in children in America. It's one of the few societies that thinks of children as an expense and the last thing to be funded. And it's ridiculous. The state of New York in 2019 spent on the average $4,000 per Medicaid kid a year. In 2021, they cut it back by 30%. So it's $3,000. Meanwhile, in 2019, we're spending $400 billion on the Medicaid program. Today, we're spending almost $1 trillion. So the state of New York is, as the white coat organizations and DNC would say, killing our children. They've been cutting back on Medicaid for years. And 50% of the kids in New York are on Medicaid. So if I'm going to use the words of the white coat organizations and the DNC, they're killing our children. How is it possible that we've doubled the amount of spend and we're cutting 30%? And then there was a very beautiful paper, methodologically flawed, just published in JAMA Pediatrics about the outcomes. At the end of the day, what's important is what the outcomes are. And since the ACA and the Medicaid expansion, the amount of chronic disease in children has gotten worse. More of our kids are on Medicaid. Less physicians and hospitals can stay in business seeing Medicaid patients. And the children have more chronic disease. And nobody, I'm not that smart, but this is published data. How can you be at peace with that? Dogma, Medicaid is great. Dogma. It is not meeting the needs of our pediatricians in rural communities, suburban communities, urban communities. It is not meeting the need of the hospitals. That's why they're closing down pediatric line of businesses.
Those are the small hospitals. The big places are expanding.
And worse yet, it is making things worse for the children. And nobody talks about this. Everybody's like, woo, the world's great, except for they're going to kill our children.
There's another dimension to that I like to throw in here. 22% of the children in my county are not living with or being raised by a biological parent.
Yeah.
Now, their adverse childhood experience scores are sky high.
Yeah.
So these really young children they're living a life of cortisol and epinephrine. There's not much serotonin in their life at all. The national average of athletes with asthma is 9%. Alabama's average is 10%. But the athletes in my practice, it's 27%. And why? Because we actually did something we're not supposed to do. Back in 2019, when they closed down the locker room cattle call for sports physicals that the hospital and the coaches all claim is a real physical, where they don't do any kind of screening at all. They just deem them all fit to play football. They couldn't do that year. So we screened 351 athletes for adverse childhood experiences. And as y'all recall, if you have 4 or more, you're not 20 years off your life. So we had a classroom of 30, 3 had a score of 3, 7 had a score of 4 or 5, and 3 more had 6 or above. So 13 out of those 30 that were in junior school already have an adverse childhood experience score that's just sky high. And my heart breaks. I don't know what to do about them. That's why we're trying to do something with this meditation program, with the thought is if we can give these children a way to regulate themselves at school and to feel like that is a safe place, then they're going to want to go there and learn, and they're going to want to feel safe. But who knows, maybe they could be able to go home to a very stressful environment and do the same thing there.
So I have to.
I know I'm way off
No,
the
no,
box.
oh, no,
Anybody. I'm
You're
sick of
not.
people
You're
talking
not.
about this and not doing anything at all.
That's right. That's right. And the answers are there. The dogma doesn't allow it to be done. There's a book that you should pick up. It's called The Optimistic Child. It's written by a psychologist at UPenn, Marty Seligman. Okay. And Marty has worked on resilience with the U.S. Armed Forces. But one of his students, who is now a professor of psychology, created a systematic process that is given to middle schoolers. They train the teachers to teach the children. And it shows that it decreases the amount of anxiety and depression and improves resiliency. When I asked Marty, why isn't this implemented in high-risk communities? He just goes, I don't know. People just read about it and then they put the book back on the shelf. When I asked the person who co-wrote the book with him, it's the same thing. This lady who's in Northwestern now, who does short-term targeted interventions through the internet. Jessica, very helpful. It's just in 1 hour. You can do it on your iPhone or a laptop. and it improves anxiety and depression in children without a therapist or medication. Now, not for the severe types, just because the dogma doesn't get enough oxygen and it doesn't get pushed to the communities where you need it. And what you're describing, we see that too in some of our communities. So Virginia is a very interesting state. The closer you get to DC is very well educated, very affluent, primarily white. Mom and dad have beyond a college education, very involved with the kids. The schools are super good. The public schools here are always ranked in top of the country in the two counties that are close to DC. You move 30 miles away from DC and you see what you're describing, except that I would imagine that in your town, it's mostly all white kids. But in these, no, you have some minorities too.
It's about 30% African American. We have several Korean car manufacturers here.
Okay.
We have a contingency of Haitian Creoles that were bussed into a community 30 miles from here that are really great people. They have language barriers and a cultural barrier, but we've got some diversity here.
So what we see when you move outside of the suburbs is the white folks, the grandparents who are not in great shape. They're very sick, usually by the time they're 55, 60 years old, are bringing in the grandchildren because their own children have died from drug addiction or are totally lost to drug addiction or disappeared because of their drug addiction. When you see the African American parents, there's often not a father involved. And it's either a grandmother or a mother taking care of multiple children.
Or
And
a great aunt or a great
great
grandmother.
aunt, the grandmother adopted two girls. One died in a car crash, and the other one died from complications of type 1 diabetes. Left her with three boys. So she's working. She has twins that are 11 and another kid's 14. And she's doing a tremendous job, but it's not easy. And as we know, because we're not exactly spring chickens anymore, as you get older, you have less resiliency, less energy. And young children demand a lot of energy because they're young. And she's doing the best she can, but the children are already obese. They're already dysglycemic. And she complains about coming to the office every 3 months to have a check because it means she has to take time away from work. And I understand that from her perspective. But from my perspective, if I don't see you every 3 months, weigh you, repeat that hemoglobin A1C, you're just slowly going to be needing insulin and have a bad outcome. But I understand her perspective. Why can't you just do this on the phone and not charge me for it? Even though the kids are on Medicaid, she doesn't want to waste the time, quote unquote, waste of time. Understandable, because she's a breadwinner. And so, yes, we even in non-rural America, we see the same disaster of the destruction of the nuclear family. In my own family, I always tell the story because it's funny. My dad's a lawyer with an MBA, he's a diplomat. And I don't think he came to one of my soccer matches. Not that he missed much because I didn't make the varsity team and I was always on the bench. So he didn't miss much. Okay. My dad didn't care. He's like, you have to do this because the prep school says you have to exercise. But you're never going to be an athlete. You're going to go to college and you're going to do something after college and you'll be in an office. But then he retired and he was fortunate that my sister's kids live a mile from his house. And he would get up every morning, go pick them up, bring them to school, pick them up after school, hang out with them, go to their soccer matches. And the man enjoyed that part of his life like he never had time to enjoy his kids because he was worried. He was making the money so that I could go to the prep school. I'd be darned if I care if he ever showed up. I'm always grateful that he paid for my school, my medical school. I always had a roof over my head. I always had 3 meals, and I had at least 2 pairs of pants. But that extended family brings joy both to the grandparent, but not at the expense of being the provider and being alone. And that's just the story of our children. But it's no longer just rural America.
It's everywhere.
And it won't change until, as you said at the beginning of the podcast, we stop with the dogma. We are honest about where we are and what has worked and what doesn't work. And then we sit down and we say, what can we try? Let's experiment with some things. Let's see which ones do better than others.
So, Doc, if you could change one thing in rural pediatrics to make it better, what do you think it would be?
I'm going to go back to something that Herb said because I think this is the crux. This is the heavy foundational piece that is not really there. It is for every single child to have two caring, engaged, present parents. If that happened, we would have a lot better outcomes. I think when you look at the other dimensions of all this, it's if it were valued financially, Alabama Medicaid pays $78 for a visit. That would be well visits or even sick visits, hadn't changed in the last 20 years. They're finally going to update that. I think they're going up $10. It's not even a break even point if you think about it. So the financial, as you said it quite well, that somehow the children and their health hasn't made it to a priority list. I think that's a major problem. You guys live in kind of academic environments. There is a little bit of a stigma that was shared with me by a patient one time when she said, if you're any good, you wouldn't live here anyway. I don't know if this was a stigma that was there when you were in your academic center training. You don't want to get another LMD consult, a local medical doctor consult, because you felt like that those guys were just idiots. There's a little bit of a sense of, you guys know what you're doing anyway. Why don't you just send them all up here to us? They can't get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can't wait 4 months.
Yeah. I'll never forget. And I imagine he's retired or he's dead by now, so I can say his name, Dr. Harold Bigger. He was a neonatologist. And we were doing rounds in the NICU when I was a resident in Chicago. And the first film, remember how the films was that thing that went round and round, and you had all the films in the
Oh,
paper?
yeah.
Okay. Because nothing was digital. The first film of this newborn that had been transported in, he had a right mainstem intubation. And I looked at him, I was a second year resident, and I'm like, Dr. Bigger, this is a small community hospital. Who knows when was the last time this anesthesiologist intubated a premature child? I think we have to understand that the win was he intubated him.
He got here alive. Yeah.
He's alive because he intubated him. He doesn't have a fellowship in neonatology. This could happen to any of us. That's why we always get a chest x-ray after we intubate. You might intubate somebody like that because you're not good yet. I certainly would never intubate anybody in mainstem bronchus. And you know what the surgeons say? If you hadn't had a complication, you haven't done enough procedures,
Yes.
Yeah.
you will have failed at intubating them. You will have put it on the right mainstem bronchus. And that's why we always get the x-ray to see where it's at. And so to judge somebody that in the middle of a war does the best they can with as little resources they have, it's just because you have a lot of dogma, a lot of ego, and no empathy. And that doesn't make for a good doctor.
I tell my parents, especially that children with handicaps and disabilities, doing the best with what you have in life, you can hold your head up because you're walking around with dignity, because that's all you can do. You do the best
Yeah.
with what you got.
Yeah. And you have to be grateful. Like some children, unfortunately, will not be capable of attending college, but they may live a wonderful life without a college education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As we reach the top of the hour, Doc, why don't you tell us about that loneliness video? Tell us a story about the loneliness video.
The isolation of the pandemic has really weighed heavy on, I think, all of America. People have gotten comfortable being off by themselves. They've gotten out of what Thomas Haidt calls in his Anxious Generation book, living IRL in real life. They've gotten away from that. And our Surgeon General just announced that he felt that loneliness was the number one health problem. It really resonated with me. I'm isolated where I live. You guys are some of the most stimulating conversation I've had in the last 20 years because I don't get to go to many meetings. I don't have relationships with other people. So I guess that built that loneliness video as much for me as anybody else. If it can help somebody be bold enough to get out of their comfortable square box that they live in and go out in the world where everybody has problems like theirs and to be able to share and to be able to find friendships and relationships, I think everybody's mental health will be better. That's why I did it. And what to do with it, where it lands, how it goes, I don't know. I just felt compelled to produce something like that. If you would, anybody that wants to look at it, use it however they want to, please feel free to do that.
Yeah, we'll share it in the show notes.
Definitely will.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. That has been one of the great gifts of the podcast. So it's that I feel that and that's hence the name, the lounge, because hospitals used to have doctors' lounges where we all got together after rounding on the newborns. We didn't eat very well. It was usually a donut and some really stale coffee. And then we went to the office. But everybody went. And if you remember, in fact, there were mailboxes in the doctor's lounge. If I saw one of your patients in the ER, I would write it up and then somebody would put it in your inbox. After you were done rounding in your newborns, you went by the lounge, you got a cup of coffee, you said hi to the other doctors, you got your reports, you went and you took it to the office. And that was our hope, that we recreate in a virtual way our ability to connect with our colleagues in all different types of communities across the country so that we no longer feel like we're fighting this battle alone. We're just not doing a good enough job of connecting with each other and sharing ideas to move things forward.
You certainly honor me by spending this time with me this morning and allowing me to talk with you all.
No, the honor is ours.
The honor is ours. It's a pleasure. Yeah. You're a true leader in your community, and we need more of you.
Now we have one last final thought before we close. Give some advice to future residents when they're thinking about rural medicine. Would you do it again?
I really think at the end of my life, I'm going to be able to feel like that. I took what I had and tried to make a difference in the world around me. And it's one thing to have the training of 4 years of medical school and 3 or 4 years of a pediatric residency program. But if you put yourself in a position where all you're doing is triaging well, are you really using what you got to the best of your ability? Why not go challenge yourself somewhere? I would just like to think that medicine is still a profession.
Not a job.
I beg your pardon?
Medicine is a profession. It's not a job.
It's a profession. Yes. And if we're going to join the long line of people that have put on the white coat, who have walked into the epidemics, knowing that they could lose their own life, they've walked into hopeless situations, but they did so with courage, armed with what they had, and they did their very best nobly to do the good for the population. That's still Man La Mancha. Think about Cervantes at the end when he looked at all the mirrors and they finally captured him and he was on trial. One of the quotes that stuck with me since I read it back in the 70s was, you call me insane and I might well be, but the most insane thing of all is to see the world as is instead of the way it could be.
I also think that my experience living in rural America was that it's a lifestyle. And so you cannot make someone want to be in rural America. There are people that like that lifestyle, like the community, like the open spaces, like the farming, and they just happen to be dentists or pediatricians or psychologists or nurse practitioners, but they're moving back to these communities because of a lifestyle. Just like some people move to the Bronx because they like the lifestyle. And so that's the key. You have to get people from rural America that want to go back to rural America because they like the lifestyle, but we have to fund it so that they can maintain their families. Because if we don't do that, they may want to go back to the rural community, but they're forced to stay in the city where the salaries are better.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yes.
This has been a very wonderful episode.
Yep.
I wish you the best of luck, and I do hope you come
Sure.
out with some meetings so that we can see you in person sometime.
Yeah. Thank you.